excited to bring in our next guest, Heather Zara. Is it Zara or Zara? Zara, like the clothing
Zara.
store.
Yeah, Zara like the clothing store. Actually, funny story about that. I used to pronounce it Zara for the longest time when I was actually an on-air reporter. And then when I started my business, we kept getting all these calls, because the store, Zara, even before we had a location in Michigan, we would get calls, are you the Zara? Do you have a size 9, shoe in this model? And we would just start laughing. But after a while, we were like, you know what? Zara does sound better, doesn't it? So we just kind of made a switch. And I don't know who else has experience with changing the pronunciation of their own last name, but let me tell you, very interesting experience when you first do it, because I kept saying, hello, this is Heather Zara. I mean, Zara, I don't know. Hi, but nice to see you. Nice to meet you.
You know what you should really do is play with people and make it Zara Zara.
Zara, right? Well, I also thought like, okay, so for example, if your name was Sarah and you were Sarah Zara, that would be interesting. So I was like, okay, we'll just make it Zara. That way Sarah, the Sarahs of the world can be Sarah. It was very confusing. But yeah.
Well, Heather, it's great to have you with us. She's the owner and the CEO for Zara Creative. It's interesting though, but you have a media background. Before we get into what you're doing now, tell us about your background and how it helped you make this leap into the new world.
Yeah. Okay. So my background is really all in communication, specifically video production. I've basically been editing videos together since I was like 13 years old. So this is a lifelong, passion and a skill that I've kind of kept building upon. So I've been a communicator basically my whole life. My parents are actually immigrants, and they were born in Iraq, and they both immigrated here separately before they met. But they had a really unique choice in that they wanted us to really be like all American and live the all American, dream, the all American life, whatever that meant for them, which was really heavily rooted in opportunity. And one of the decisions that they made when raising my brother and I was that they didn't teach us Arabic or Chaldean, their native languages, because what they wanted was they wanted us to really be like fully immersed in the American experience. So I really appreciate their mindset at the time. But one of the challenges and also one of the foundations of my very life, what I've built upon, is this concept that the people who raised me, and myself, we didn't actually speak the same first language, which is really interesting, right? Like, English is their third language. They're fluent in it and they're amazing. My dad was actually going to be an English professor when he was studying in Iraq. He's not that anymore, but anyway. So I'm fascinated by how people communicate. I had to get really creative with how I communicated certain things growing up in my house, because certain things just don't translate, right? So little did I know, until years upon, after reflecting just kind of on my own personal story, how much that really laid the foundation for my passion, which is communication, finding easier ways to communicate with each other, finding ways to communicate with each other that helps heal ourselves, instead of making kind of reinforcing some of these old assumptions about what we think others are thinking or feeling. So I think communication is one of the most important pillars, whether you're in media or you're a professional communicator for a living or not. I mean, if you just, are stuck in your house, much like most of us have been for, 2020, if you live with others, you have to still have really strong communication skills with anyone in your life. So for me, communication is a huge passion. And that's kind of where it began for me, why I wanted to become a storyteller. My professional background starts as a sports reporter. That's basically what I was, went to school for. I've got a journalism degree from Michigan State. And I had been a sports reporter since I was pretty young. I got my first gig at like 19, started a TV show at Michigan State, won an Emmy Award for that, which is kind of fun as a 20-year-old student. And I just had a passion for storytelling. Shortly after that, when I was in college, I interned at an ABC station in Lansing. I interned at Fox 2, which I know you have a background at Fox 2. Which I loved that TV station, by the way.
I hope my husband wasn't too tough on you. Did he make you earn the letters of your name?
Oh my gosh, I don't even know I don't know about that, but I loved working with Woody. I loved working with Woody Woodruff, that whole sports team at Fox 2. Dan Miller, Jennifer Hammond, Ryan Romani, these people were like such a core foundation, and actually a big part of, you know, kind of why I started Zara Creative, and some of the beautiful cultural moments that they had such a strong culture in that sports department. And it was so refreshing to see kind of that kind of a bond, because I don't know, the news industry isn't exactly, in my experience, wasn't exactly the most like warming and welcoming. It's a little bit cutthroat. You know, there's like, you know, 4 positions in each, you know, role in every city. And so it's difficult. It's challenging to get a job in the field. So it always felt a little bit cutthroat and competitive, but the Fox 2 fam always made me feel at home. So that was cool. More recently, then I then went to Channel 4. I was a reporter there for almost 4 years. And when I was reporting there, I then took the leap to work for the Detroit Pistons to focus more on sports. I was doing mostly like traffic and sports at Channel 4. I loved working at Channel 4. I got so much beautiful experience from there. But one of the things was they really needed me to be a traffic reporter. I'm not a traffic reporter. I'm not a traffic reporter. I'm a storyteller. So with traffic, there's not a whole lot of storytelling. There's not a whole lot of inspiration. There's not a whole lot of sharing. And for me, my why is always, I like to share my stories and other stories so that others can find clarity and see themselves more clearly, so they could do the work that they were meant to do here. Like, I think we all have a mission. And so it wasn't fulfilling for me. So I went to the Detroit Pistons, and I was a sports reporter there for the team. It was just a really unique time. It was 2011. So let's go back 10 years, 10 years in time. And I had been working for the team for about 6 months. And all of a sudden the NBA went into a lockout. So I don't know how many people remember that time, but it felt eerily familiar to 2020 when I got the first news that the world was shutting down from COVID. My first news was hearing one of the NBA players getting COVID. And it was very reminiscent. I'm like, oh my gosh, what's happening? Anyway, at that time, I feel that sometimes when things kind of start shutting down and it looks like we have blocks in front of us, I actually think that those become sometimes the thing that needed to happen in order for something else to be created. So my business was really created from a period of a similar period of like a standstill, similar to what we experienced together as a world in 2020 in March, right? So here I am, I'm working for this team, I'm there for 6 months, and the NBA goes into a lockout. At that time, I can accredit this, you know, upon reflection, looking back at that time. I'm so grateful I was there for that short period, because if I wasn't, I wouldn't have met the now owner, Tom Gores, of the Detroit Pistons. But because I worked there and he bought the team during that time, I was able to meet that group. I was able to meet Tom and his colleagues, right? So I was kind of in the mix. Looking back, that was a very pivotal, like, right place, right time. I still work with Platinum Equity, Tom Gores, and the Detroit Pistons to this day. So that was like kind of serendipitous. But at that time when the lockout was happening, I was kind of looking around and going, I have no players to interview. I have nothing to do. I'm going to work every day, and I don't have a purpose, right? So at this point, when all of this was happening, I was 27 years old. So a lot of my friends were getting married. So every time I would log on to Facebook, I would see engaged, right? So that's in the back of my head, right? I'm taking stock of what's happening in the world, in my world. NBA's locked down, okay? Don't know when that's gonna come back. And I just left the news industry, the news world, which I'd been in for about 8 years at that point, and I started this new venture. All these things are kind of floating in my head. Keeping in mind, I wasn't exactly the person who was like dreaming of their wedding day when they grew up. I'm not married still to this day, which is fine. No, nothing against marriage. I think people who choose to get married, it's a beautiful thing. But I wasn't exactly like wedding, obsessed or anything. But all these things were kind of happening. I go over to a friend's house during this time and watch their wedding video. I'd never seen a wedding video before this day. I just assumed in my mind that they looked like something, you know, your Uncle Joe gets a camcorder and he's shooting the things and boop, boop, bop, and there's a toast and there's a whatever. So I'm watching their wedding film and I'm watching, and it's beautiful. It's storytelling, it's cinematic. It gave me the chills. I was super into it. And as a person who's not that into weddings, you know, naturally I was drawn. I was like, what is happening? This is what a wedding video is? Immediately when I watched that, it was like literally gut reaction. I thought to myself, I could do that. And I thought I could do it better because at the time, 27, egomaniac, right? Like I just thought I could do everything. Sometimes that little boost of ego kind of helps, you know, at the time. So back then I thought to myself, it was like literally, I don't think I thought about it more than that 15 minutes. The idea got into my head. I started researching and I was like, oh my gosh, I could totally start my own company and I could totally work with small businesses and I can work with these brides and I know all these people who are getting married every 5 seconds and this will be good. And I didn't think about it very long and I just started planning. And that's kind of the long story short of how I started my business. I was really present to all the weird stuff that was happening around me. I took all these random, seemingly unconnected things and I somehow connected the dots. And then I think here's the one thing that actually allowed me to leap was I had belief in myself. Like, you know, we were listening to the last person that you had on the show talking about betting. And the first thing that came to me was betting on yourself. And I think the one thing that I can toot my horn for and say that I've done really well, and I think every entrepreneur who actually does their own thing and still has their own thing, is you bet on yourself. Like, you bet on yourself, you bet on your skills, you bet on what you know you can do. And I know I can communicate. I know that I've built my entire life on this foundation. And I also trust myself. So I don't think I'm magical. I think what happens is we all have this gut reaction. We have this thing in our belly that talks to us. And I think most of us let fear talk us out of it. I just don't let that fear talk me out of it. Instead, I work with it. And I say, you know what? I know you're here, but I'm just going to go bet on myself anyway. And I'm going to do this thing because it just eats at me if I won't. So that's the long story short of how I started the business. We do not do weddings anymore. I eliminated that portion of the business about 5-6 years ago. So we work with global lifestyle brands. We work with a lot of awesome brands here in Detroit locally. And really, we want to work with brands who are concerned with elevating our experience here as human beings. So any brand that is looking to, you know, have a product or service that elevates our life, elevates our experience as human beings, we want to work with them. So we're really fortunate. We work with awesome brands like Apple, the Detroit Pistons, the city of Detroit, which is not a brand, but they're, you know.
Oh no, they're a brand. I can tell you, you want to talk about someone who has reshaped the narrative around the city of Detroit.
Totally.
Mayor Duggan, because before
Absolutely.
when I used to travel, it was like, oh my gosh, you're from Detroit. Now it's like,
you're
oh
right.
my God, you're from Detroit. I hear great things about Detroit. It's coming
Totally.
back. And I'm like, come with me for a day.
Totally. And Mayor Duggan, you're totally right, is such a huge reason for that. I mean, he represents so fully like the types of humans that we love working with, you know, people that here's a good Mayor Duggan story. One of the things he shared with us was, we want to lead with light. We don't want to lead with fear. And I just think, especially after the last 4 years, you know, what a beautiful message and how much he's really stuck to that. Like,
Heather, I have stories about him that do not share that perspective, but we'll leave that for another time.
Totally.
Because he definitely leads by fear for so many people. But with that, I thought the video, I was on your website earlier, the video you did with Chief Craig was beautiful, and how it was told, and his tone and how he did it was very well told. And it was just that a story as well. But when we're talking about that too, what's it been like? You take this leap, now you have a new business and it's being successful, but then we go into a pandemic. And one thing about video production and your videos, they're very touching. Like, you can see not just the smile on the face, but the light in their eyes. So how has that changed how you're filming in the middle of the virus? Did you have to take a pause at all?
So my, as I'm thinking about that question, so for me in my story, the moments that are like the shocking ones, like the moments where it feels like the world shut down or like something happened. So like, for example, I reference, I started my business during an NBA lockout, and I worked for an NBA team, right? So like at the time, my world was like shut down, you know? When this pandemic happened, you want my honest, here's kind of the order of my gut reactions. One, human fear arose because the whole world shut down. And I was like, what is happening? Just like everyone else, I had fears. Second thing that's going into my awareness is the business. What am I going to do about the business? The beauty is when this happened, I was almost 10 years into running my own company. So when you run your own company, guess what? Things happen. Lots of weird things come at you. So this was not my first experience with something, major. The truth is, and I think a lot of entrepreneurs share this, is I actually, when moments like that happen, I recognize them as key pivotal moments. And I think we have two options. We can look at it as, doom and gloom and destruction, or we can look at it as an opportunity to pivot. And the truth is our company vision has always been to expand. We've always been a global minded company. We're obsessed with travel. So part of our company vision was building in this remote model, the ability to create stories and edit and work with directors and crews from really anywhere in the world. Part of that was my own desire to not want to be fully rooted in one place. I think I'm kind of like a bumblebee in the fact that I like to kind of buzz around, and that's how I get my inspiration and my creativity. So the interesting thing is this set us up and forced us to figure out ways of pivoting quicker than, the big picture vision was planning. I was planning on expanding to Los Angeles, Denver, years in the a couple of years down the road. This forced us to think a little bit quicker. So everything is digital. We actually have been working so well as a team remotely that about 3 months into working remote with the pandemic, we immediately decided to lease out our office space in Ferndale, which is beautiful. We have 5,500 square feet of, completely custom designed spaces. It's gorgeous. I spent a lot of my time and energy on that building, prior to COVID. But I think sometimes as an entrepreneur and just in general, you have to really be present to what's happening and make decisions like quickly and not overthink them. And that was another kind of gut reaction that came to me. I said, let's list it. So called real estate agent, we listed the space, and we actually have someone renting out our building until September 1st, which is awesome. So that was one thing that we did because we have a really aligned values, aligned team and super experienced. Everyone's really talented. I'm so grateful I had them on the team going into the pandemic. We ended up actually growing by 2. We hired 2 people to our team during the pandemic. In terms of the actual functionality of video production, the beauty is when the pandemic first started, we had a ton of projects to edit. So from post-production, we were mostly focused on post-production. So that was kind of beautiful from a timing standpoint to give us some time to think. In terms of adjusting, it happened once spring kind of hit, and the summer we were shooting a lot outside, obviously mask, taking all the CDC precautions necessary, and we're shooting again. So we've been shooting. Everyone is masked up. We take all the proper procedures. We make sure that everyone is feeling well. I actually had a don't come to work sick rule pre-COVID. This was always like part of our values. Like we just care about people more than profits. It's just who we are. And so I would always say, if you're not feeling well, just take the day, be human, take care of yourself. So kind of bizarre that some of our practices actually kind of alluded to this kind of new world that we live in. And it's actually another weird thing. So we travel a lot for work, right? And we'll do shoots in London. We were supposed to have a ton of shoots in Europe in 2020. And what we ended up doing is, this beautiful tool that we're speaking on right now, Zoom, is kind of magical. It's a little magical right now. We're in each other's spaces and we're in our own. So I conducted like 3 interviews in London just from here. So it's interesting, because we have a dynamic network of amazing, talented people from all around the world. We'll call those crews that know how we work. And I basically set it up so that we're directing it. And I'm like, okay, so position laptop, where I would be sitting, and it just works. So I think that obviously no one wants to see us in a global pandemic. No one wants to see, our fellow human beings getting sick and dying. Nobody wants that. But I think that one of the things that this brought to light is that just how little control we do have of external things, and that's never going to go away. We never will have control of what's happening in the outside world. But what we do have control of is ourselves, how our mindset is organized, how we're listening to ourselves, and how we pivot, and how we, allow the fear to be there, but we utilize that fear almost to alchemize it into something that pushes us forward. So I think that this pandemic has given us kind of an opportunity to perhaps do things differently, to do things more efficiently, to also so one of the things that I'm really, really big on is culture, creating really beautiful cultures that bring out the best in us instead of these environments, workplaces that, bring out the worst in us. And I think for most of society, we work at places that don't bring out the best in us. And so if working from home and this extra layer of flexibility provides more value to our team members, I'm all about it. If in the future they want to work from home, like 3 days a week, 4 days a week, whatever they want. And this has proved to us that we can be efficient. We can manage our time in unique ways, and we can really still create magic even when we're not together. So I think that this has given us an opportunity to think more entrepreneurially, even if you're not one. And I might have made up my word there.
And that is so true for so many people right now during this time. They're realizing that the way they used to live is not how they want to continue to live, and they want to chase those dreams. Heather, it's been great having you with us here on the show.
Thank you.
I'm so happy to see you be so successful. It's so great. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.